This is Sports Jam. I'm Doug Doyle. My guest today is a true warrior, both on and off the football field. Number 53, Harry Carson was a force for the New York Giants from 1976 to 1988, making 9 Pro Bowls. Carson and Lawrence Taylor, two of the best linebacker pairings in the sport's history, and they led the Giants to a Super Bowl 21 victory. Harry Carson was inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame in 2002, the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 2006, and the New Jersey Hall of Fame in 2018. He is also a cancer survivor. It's my honor to welcome the great Harry Carson to Sports Jam. Great to see you, Harry.
All right, good seeing you.
So let's go back to January 25th, 1987. Super Bowl 21 at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena, California.
Yeah.
Your Giants defeated John Elway and the Denver Broncos 39-20. And for the first Giants Super Bowl win and first NFL title for the team since 1956. And
Were you
as
there?
I was not there,
You weren't there?
but I was watching.
If you had known me, I could have gotten you tickets.
See, that would have been
I was
great.
there.
You certainly were there. And
I
that's
had
the
good seats, field level seats.
as the clock was winding down, you doused head coach Bill Parcells with a Gatorade shower that, has become synonymous with the Super Bowl. You were part of this big goal line stop against the Broncos that really turned the game around. But what do you remember most about that game?
I remember that we won.
You certainly did.
No, the thing that I remember probably more than anything else is we were righting a wrong because in '85, we had a pretty good season, went to Chicago. We thought that we were better than them. We made some mistakes and we didn't make it. And so we came back in '86 during the off season, and everybody to a man had a much different attitude and work ethic. And there was nobody who could tell us that we were not going to go to Super Bowl 21. And we went, um, we won the game, and it all sort of, people ask, well, what was the thing that, lit you guys fire? And I said it was losing to Chicago in Chicago. And but the thing that I remember probably personally more than anything else is going out for the coin toss, and Parcells told me to go by myself as a captain, and I'm walking to midfield. And to this day, I really don't know exactly why he wanted me to do that. I don't know what kind of message he wanted me, but it wasn't like I said, Bill, I want to go out by myself. I don't want anybody else with me, but it served its purpose. And there's so many people who I run into, Giant fans, and they say the same thing. Man, when you walk down on the field and, Denver had 5 or 6 guys who were walking towards you, they would say, man, that was so cool.
It really was. And you have said, you knew Parcells on a different level because you knew him when he was coaching on the defensive side.
Yeah,
So that relationship, I think we can even go back to the play call where you get to catch a pass on a fake field goal
yeah.
during your career. I think that was a tribute to Harry Carson and all the work you've done. He had so much respect for his linebacker, didn't he?
He did because Bill was one of us. I mean, he was when Ray Perkins took over as head coach. He brought in Bill Parcells. Parcells had myself. At one point, he had myself. He had Brian Kelly. He had Brad Van Pelt. It was one of these situations where it was one of these situations that he was one of us. You know, but when he became the head coach, he became one of them. So we knew Bill. We knew Bill on a much different level when he was, one of us, and we knew what he liked and what he didn't like, and we wanted him to be successful. Unfortunately, having Lawrence Taylor, myself, Brad Van Pelt, and Brian Kelly didn't necessarily get us to that level. So Brad Van Pelt and Brian Kelly were jettisoned from the team for different reasons. And Carl Banks and Gary Reasons were those guys who were big linebackers who could run and get the job done. So he could do a lot with the talent that he had with the four of us, especially with Lawrence.
When you say they could run, all of you could run. I mean, the you and LT had this amazing ability to blitz at just the right time. Where did that come from?
Game plan. But playing with Lawrence, you didn't know what you were going to get. I mean, sometimes he would do some freelancing, and they allowed him to do it because he was making plays, and he was a guy who would take chances. And I knew that if he took a chance and he failed to accomplish what he was trying to do, I would be there to fill in for him. I'd be his backstop. And so I knew how he played. He knew how I played, and that's one of the really good things about the longevity of players staying with one team and knowing that guy next to you and what he's going to do and how you guys are going to mix, together. It's not necessarily the case now, but back then, I knew exactly what Lawrence was going to do, even though he might have slept through it in meetings, when Belichick would be going over, certain defenses and so forth.
We, at least I do, I look at great players, not just Hall of Fame players, but great players, those who could perform in clutch situations. When we talk about Harry Carson, we talk about not only playing and winning in the Super Bowl, Super Bowl 21, making that big stop on that goal line stand, as I mentioned, but also on the way, he had a game-sealing interception and 12 tackles against the Redskins. In the 84 NFC Divisional Playoff game, he intercepted the incredible Joe Montana and intercepted a pass for a touchdown.
Montana from his own end zone has some time. Picked off by Harry Carson. Carson to the inside to 5. Carson touchdown. Intended for Dwight Clark. The Giants are back in it.
Harry Carson might not be back in it. I think he's on the bottom of that pile.
He may not be able to breathe.
He's the old timer on that team, 9-year veteran. Harry Carson, he gets up shaking his head. What did I do? I'll tell you, the offensive players aren't good defensive players. They don't tackle very well, but Harry looked like he had a few moves on that thing.
And I mentioned the fake field goal touchdown catch against the Eagles in '86. Clutch. But you're saying preparation is the reason that you could come up in the big games and make it happen.
Well, when we took the field, the one thing that I could say is we were coached so well that whatever an opposing team tried to do, we knew how to defend it because we had already seen it. I mean, we had been prepared, and that's one of the good things about Parcells and Belichick, man. You are thoroughly briefed on what might happen on the field, and you're responsible for knowing it and being ready to make any changes that might occur during the course of the game. I don't know if that's the case now with players, but we were very well coached as a defense and as a team.
I mentioned to you before we started the interview that I'm a lifelong Pittsburgh Steelers fan coming from the Pittsburgh area. And when I think of great linebackers, I think of Jack Ham, Jack Lambert, Andy Russell, and then some other guys who joined the way. Who was better, the Giants linebacker core or the Steelers linebacker core?
Do I really have to answer that?
I think I know, but very similar if you ask me, because you all had roles, right?
Yeah.
And Lambert was so good against the pass, and he could stop the run up the middle. Jack Ham was a very unique linebacker, just like and you in your situation, your ability to blitz, stop the run, LT as a pass rusher beyond comprehension. And then you had Gary Reasons and Carl Banks in the Super Bowl. They could handle, Banks would certainly handle the outside like Jack Cam could. Very similar, and the reasons that both teams were Super Bowl champions. Obviously, you agree.
You're leaving out some, a reason why both teams were successful. It was those guys up front. Ernie Holmes, L.C. Greenwood, Joe Green. Those guys made a difference. And when you have players of that magnitude who are great players, there's a lot that you can do. And when you have those linebackers, Russell and Lambert, those guys are really, really good. We were the same way. We had really good defensive linemen in front of us, and they brought out the best. And we played together as a unit. The four up front and the three linebackers, or the three linebackers, with a great nose tackle in Jim Burt. And so you have George Martin, you have Leonard Marshall, those guys were really, 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 really good. And the other, as linebackers, we played well off of those guys. So.
And you're absolutely right, and that's why you played the game and I didn't.
So it's 1st and 15 on the Giant 31-yard line. Virgil Say is back in there, the little guy on the right side. Harry Carson brings him down at midfield. The middle linebacker blitzed, and he ate up Theismann. They lost 19 yards on that blitz.
Bill Parcells said that we're going to have to rely on our linebackers for pass rush, and we just saw it from Harry Carson. The big thing about that Harry Carson sack was that he took the Redskins out of field goal position.
You mentioned George Martin, and really Parcells trusted you two when there was a message that needed to be sent, right? In the locker room, you two were the guys that he wanted to get that message to the entire team.
Well, we were guys who were older, and we said what needed to be said at the appropriate time. And sometimes Parcells, he would pull us aside and he'd say, this guy isn't doing this, that guy isn't doing blah, blah, blah. And he would say, I'd ask, well, why are you telling me? And he'd say, you fix it. And so then it was up to me to go to that guy, or it was up to George to go to a guy and handle it, or it could be a whole group. We were able to gauge the temperature of the team. When we would run out for warm-ups, and if we thought that the players weren't quite ready or they were taking things for granted, we'd call timeout, gather everybody around, use some choice words and some four-letter words that need to be said, and speaking in their language. And you get guys fired up and you say what needs to be said. And, Bill knew that we were not apprehensive about, being leaders, and whether it was on the field or whether it was in the locker room or whether it was, in the meeting room at the halftime of a game that we're playing, we'd say what needed to be said.
There's only a few players that are lucky enough to douse their coach with Gatorade after a Super Bowl victory. Now it's even become they have betting on what color the Gatorade's going to be and whatnot. So when you watch, you know, the most recent Super Bowls and you see the dousing, that has to take you back to that moment where you doused Parcells, right?
Carson has changed shirts and is in the security uniform now. That's the yellow jacket that security people, and there it comes.
Well, there's two kinds. There's plain water and there's the sticky stuff. And when it has color in it, it's sticky.
It's kind of nice to see that over the years, it is still the case. It is still that symbol of we are the champions. And we did it like in 1986, and we didn't continue to do it, but we sort of set what winning a championship is all about. I've seen a lot of football and a lot of sports, and some people can do it appropriately and some people can't. But the bucket gets really heavy, man, if you're looking to horse that bucket over your head so that you're getting not the back of the neck, but it's it's just one of those things that you have to have the strength. And there are some guys who will try to do the whole 5-gallon bucket. The trick is you throw some of the stuff away, and then you come in and you douse the coach. And if you're gonna win a championship and you're gonna show off or celebrate,
take that to heart. All those potential dousers this year. Who knows who's going to be, right?
Yeah, and you don't do it too quickly because somebody might come back after. I've got to make sure that you are 4 or 5 touchdowns ahead of the opposing team. Otherwise, you might be embarrassed, and your coach might be embarrassed.
So true. Someone might be watching the Sports Jam edition right now and say, why does Doug have a Donnie Shell Pro Bowl jersey, number 31, behind me? Well, those of you that know the background of our guest, Harry Carson, knows that Donnie Shell and Harry Carson were teammates at South Carolina State. And at that time, Donnie was a linebacker, eventually moved to be a Pro Bowl safety and Hall of Famer with the Pittsburgh Steelers, and was on that team that we had already talked about with, the Steel Curtain and those linebackers.
And at that time, at South Carolina State, I was a down defensive lineman. I'd never played linebacker. Donnie was a linebacker and I was a right defensive end. And we played together from my rookie year until I graduated. Well, Donnie left 2 years prior to me, and he made the Steelers as a free agent. When I was drafted by Marty Schottenheimer, who converted me from a down defensive lineman to a middle linebacker. And so it's one of the things that I'm very proud of, because Donnie Shell was able to make that transition from being a linebacker to being a safety. I was able to make that transition from being a down defensive lineman to being a stand-up 4-3 linebacker. And so one of the things that I look at is we're 2 guys from this small black school in South Carolina, and we made the Pro Football Hall of Fame playing positions that we'd never played before. And we were able to make that transition.
Think about that. Now, When you two were playing on the same team at South Carolina State, you obviously had no idea that both of you would end up in Canton, Ohio as members of the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
I had no idea that I would be drafted to play in the National Football League. Donnie played when I got to South Carolina State, he was a rising junior. And so I learned a lot from Donnie. He was sort of like my mentor. Donnie Shell and Barney Chavis, those were the two guys who I thought a lot about when, as I was playing the game. It's one of those things that you have good coaches. They teach you how and what to do. Donnie had guys with the Pittsburgh Steelers who knew exactly what buttons to push to get the best out of him. I had Marty Schottenheimer, who took the chance on me to play a position that I had never played before and who allowed me to play, make mistakes, but to make the mistakes that I made full speed, and to be able to go from being that down defensive lineman to being a stand-up middle linebacker. So, we both had really good coaches, and I'm very thankful for those who were able to see that I was a pretty good player, but they allowed me to play the way that I played, because oftentimes, with Marty, he would have me do a drill and I would do it wrong, but then I got the same or better results doing it my way. And he just said, just go and play.
Yeah.
And when I went to South Carolina State, I went to get a degree. I didn't go to take that next step to be in the NFL. I certainly was not looking at it. And the thing about it is, I graduated with my class, which means I was not just playing football; I was going to class as well.
That's not always done,
I
as we know.
I walked with my class, and my mother was there, my family was there, and proudest moment of their life is to see me, walk away from college with a degree in education.
Another thing that you have in common with Donnie Shell, by the way, Donnie mentioned to me during the show that it was Mel Blount that took him aside right away and said, you're not going to start right away, but we're
Mhm.
going to win championships here and you're going to be part of it and you're going to start eventually.
Mhm.
And so he hung in there and did a fantastic job as a special teams player for a while before he
Mhm.
got his shot.
Right.
But why you two are so similar, not only in the Pro Football Hall of Fame together as great football players, but you're also great men. And you have been helping others for many, many years. Earlier this year, it was in September 28th, in fact, at MetLife Stadium, you were honored, celebrated for being cancer free at the NFL Giants' crucial catch game.
Mhm.
And for years, you've been in partnership with the Hackensack Meridian Health. You've been the face of the battle against prostate cancer, an advocate for men's health and life-saving power of early cancer screening. You had successful surgery. What do you want to say about the need for everyone to have annual checkups, screening, and take care of yourself?
Well, I want to tell men to get checked for prostate cancer, especially men of color. Go and get checked. You may not have any symptoms, but after a certain age, you want to go and you want to take care of your health. I have people, one of my doctors. Um, I'm very thankful for him showing me the way. Lester Levine, that's his name, and he was an older, doctor, and 2 years after I left football, I went for a yearly physical, and he sat me down after um, I took my physical, and he said, everything is fine. Just want you to know that maybe in another 2 or 3 years, you might want to start getting screened because, you'll be, 40 in a couple of years, and you really have to start thinking about, getting checked. And I said, well, Doc, let's go ahead and get started now. So at the age of 37, I was getting um, checked for prostate cancer. And every year I would go in and take my physical, and I'd say, okay, Doc, let's get it over and done with. And it wasn't until this year that they saw something abnormal in my urine. And they wanted to follow up. And I said, cool, fine. And what eventually happened is they called me into the office and they said, you have prostate cancer. And I realized, I'm like, wow, I've been running from prostate cancer for a long time. And all of a sudden, I got prostate cancer. And I was able to live my way normally through this whole thing. And what I wanted more than anything else was to document everything that was going to take place. And I wanted men to see what I'm going through with prostate cancer. And, if you go to YouTube and, you do Harry Carson, you'll see where, I was interviewed prior to surgery. I was interviewed when I was ready for surgery, and I was interviewed afterwards, and, the follow-ups and so forth. And the most important thing regarding prostate cancer is you got to make certain that you get it early. Don't be afraid to go and apprehensive about anything. Just go get checked, be a man about it. Please, I don't want to hear men, especially men of color, say, no, I don't feel anything. You're not going to feel anything because prostate cancer is like a silent killer. And if you wait too long, then that's it. And if you don't want to do it for yourself, look at your kids, look at your wife, look at your mother, look at all your relatives when you're sitting at dinner, for Thanksgiving or whatever, and know that when you're screened, it's not necessarily for you. It's for your relatives. It's for those people who love you. So that's how I approach it now. Every man should know exactly what to do at a certain age. My sons now know that their father had prostate cancer. That might be one of the things that my father may have had, but it was not shared with me as a cause of his death a long time ago. I mean, when I was in college, that's when he passed away. So you really need to know what your family health history is all about. And you just make certain that you don't, I don't want to hear any asinine statements like, I'm afraid of what they might find. My teammate Brad Van Pelt, we had a screening a long time ago, and I wanted him, I begged him to go and get checked, and he said, not going. And when he said, I'm not going, I knew his mind was made up. And I begged him, please, go get checked. And so eventually what happened was 6 months later, he had a heart attack, passed away. I had a teammate, Jim Burt. Jim Burt and I would have conversations, and he would say, the only way that I'm going to go get checked is if you take me. And I'm like, okay, I'll take you.
I'll take it.
Yeah. I pulled up to his house, and you have to envision this, right? I pulled up to his house, and there was a gate there. I mashed the button, and the gate opened up. And I drove down to the front of the house. I'm just sort of painting this picture. And I opened the door for him. He jumped in. I took him into the city for this screening. And so it wasn't like he was destitute or poor or he couldn't afford it. His gates opened up. He lived in Franklin, in Saddle River, New Jersey. He was living in, affluence, but he didn't want to go. Mm. And I'm like, you're going to go and, you're going to get checked and you're going to like it, And so, that's the way that I am or have been with my teammates. I'm their captain. And if I say, you're going, you're going. And so, in so many ways, I'm kind of like a father figure. George Martin is the same way. Sort of, we never stopped being captains at the end of the 1988 season. Right. We continue to be, captains for life.
Yeah. You're a true leader, and we only have a few minutes left. And I do want to bring up the movie Concussion. Mm-hmm. I remember as a young kid watching Mike Webster run at our elementary school with his Great Dane, and he was such a massive figure and a center for the Super Bowl champion Steelers. CTE, you've had post-concussion syndrome since 1990, and I know you've spoken out at times about CTE. What do you want to tell us about that? We just have a few minutes to go.
Oh, we're talking about prostate cancer and now CTE. It's when I left football, I kind of knew something was going on, but I couldn't really put my finger on exactly what it was. And that doctor who I applauded a little while ago, he was the one who asked me after the yearly physical, is everything, you're good and everything is fine. Do you have anything else, bothering you? And I said, nope. So you sure? I said, well, I've been feeling this way and that way and blah, blah, blah. Long story short, he referred me to a specialist and went through 2 days of testing, and the diagnosis came back as a mild post-concussion syndrome. And because it had been 2 years since I had played football, it probably was permanent in nature. And so I asked him, I said, I'd never heard of post-concussion syndrome before. And it took me back to Doug Doyle, who, when he left football, got kicked in the head and wound up having these severe headaches. And he eventually, he passed away with a brain tumor. And I was thinking, could that be me? And so I wanted to get it checked. And so when I got it checked, and he said, my post-concussion syndrome, I asked him, will I live? And he said, you'll live, you'll just have to learn how to manage it. Mm. And so when he said, you have to learn how to manage it, you'll live, that was the key for me, in that whenever I'm feeling depressed, whenever noise bothers me or bright lights bother me, or whenever I just don't feel right, I know in time that will pass because I'm learning how to manage it. And so, I've lived with post-concussion syndrome for since the first day I started playing football. Now, I'm not going to say that, what I'm about to say, a lot of people don't want to hear what I have to say, but had it not been for me quitting on the first day of football practice, I probably would have loved the game. But I never really loved playing football. The reason why I started playing football is because it was for girls, It was the uniform. It was the uniform. And I quit on the first day of practice because I didn't run. I didn't do anything. I mean, coming out of South Carolina, man, it's hot. It's hot in July and August. And I didn't like the taste of quitting in my gut. And so I went back and I made it through practice. And for me, it wasn't so much about loving the game. For me, it was cherishing the relationships that I developed in high school and then went on to college, those relationships, and then drafted to play with the Giants and those relationships, and then those guys who I played with in the Super Bowl, those relationships, and after football, those relationships. It is those guys who I value more than anything else. So if I had, people ask, well, would you do it all over again? Because, you played football. And I would say, given what I know, if I had to do it all over again, I would not have done it. Mm. If I had to do it all over again, knowing what I know, but I didn't know, certain things back then. So, but I do think that parents should make a decision as to what their kids are doing, because football is not for everybody. There are some kids who go out there and they push themselves because their father played football and they're throwing their bodies around and so forth. I had concussions, but they weren't like major concussions. Now, I'm not minimizing the concussions that I did have, but you hit somebody or somebody hit you and you see stars. I've never really missed a game as a result of concussions, but I know what a concussion is.
What age would you say is appropriate to have a kid play football?
That's up to the parent.
Okay.
That's up to the parent. And I'll just leave it like this. When my grandson was 2, I told my granddaughter, or I told my daughter, he will not play football. When he was 2. Now, my grandson is bigger than me. He's like 6'3". He's like 300 pounds. Wow. And he would have been an offensive lineman if he had played football. And being an offensive lineman, he's going to be he would deal with contact on every play.
Wow. Because
defensively, players are coming after the running back and he wasn't a skilled player. Let's put it like that. He wasn't going to be a running back. From the age of 2, I knew that I didn't want him to play. And I have to be very careful about imposing my will because he's not my child. I'm just the grandfather. His father is from South Carolina, and his dad, I'm sure his dad wanted to see him play football at some point, living in the South and Friday Night Lights and all of that stuff. And whenever I would get information regarding head trauma and certain things that young people go through in regards to the trauma that they've sustained, I pass it on to my daughter because I want her to understand what she is putting her son through, if that's what they want to do. It's their decision. So the way I kind of top it off is, when you leave football as a player, you go through this process of getting a physical, and they give certain parts of your body like a monetary value. Your knees are worth, I don't know, $20,000. Your shoulders, your ankles or whatever. But they don't give a price for the brain. And, you can get knee replacement surgery, you can get hip replacement surgery, shoulder, replacement surgery. Can't replace the brain. You only get one. And so that's the thing. I mean, if it, when back in the 90s, the NFL acknowledged certain things regarding concussions and traumatic brain injury, but the damage is already done once you've already played. The other thing is, there are there well, if I continue to talk along these lines, I'll probably be here
That's okay. We have all the time you want.
for the rest of the day. But again, I go back to, given what I know now, if I had to do it all over again, I would not have done it. But if I had not done it, I probably would not have met all of the guys who I love and care for. When I look at the guys who are playing and who are struggling now with traumatic brain injury, and when I say traumatic brain injury, not just with football, but any contact sport where the head is involved. But also, I've done a lot of work with soldiers who have experienced bomb blasts, uh, head trauma from that standpoint. Uh, Even women who have been equestrians, who get on a horse and they ride and they fall 100 times. They fall, but that one time that they fall and they're not able to get back on a horse. And so it has been a very interesting ride for me to just understand that when you damage the brain, your life probably will never ever be the same. And so, one of the sad things that I've encountered in my life is meeting a guy in Manhattan, and he recognized me, and he was a veteran. And he was a veteran who was able to tell me that he lives on the street. He suffered from uh, traumatic brain injury. And he said, keep saying what you're saying so people will know the dangers of traumatic brain injury. So I just sort of leave that up to, parents and whatever they want to do. Um, it's their life, and if that is, what they want to do with their kid or their son, their daughter, head trauma, whatever. Um, far be it from me to say, don't do it. Just understand what you are signing your kids up for. So,
Yeah, it's a powerful statement.
yeah,
If you were in charge of the NFL, how would you change anything regarding
you
CTE?
can't. you can't change because the just
It's a
playing
violent sport, right? It's violent.
it's a violent sport, and quite frankly, you cannot alarm families and especially mothers because the mother of a child who's playing, she's going to make the decision, not the father. Father's going to say, "Well, you'll be tough, and you'll get through it." Blah blah blah. Mothers aren't like that. They're like, "Nope, I don't want you to play." And once a mother says no, that is going to have an effect on um, players, future players, um, future fans, and on and on and on, you know. So you can't really change it because that is the nature of the game. You're running around, and it's not necessarily getting hit, getting hit by somebody because you're going to get hit one way or another. You're going to get hit. It's a contact sport, but um, when you are working on the blocking sled and teaching players how to engage another player on a sled, and you hit the sled with as much force as you have, and then you recoil, you bounce back. You don't see the danger of hitting that sled with all of your might, and then you're bouncing back. You know, I've had uh, a couple of twinkly stars in front of my eyes, hitting that sled. So it's not just you know just one of those things that it is a part of the game.
Mm. And speaking of the game,
Hmm.
Giants fans are upset of how the recent seasons have gone. Uh, you had a unique career where you were with the Giants when you had ups and downs, as you said. You had teams that weren't so good, and then you had great teams. So as you watch the Giants now, what are your impressions of, how do you view the Giants of 2025 in the past few seasons?
The Giants of now remind me of the Giants of then, because I went through the same thing. You know, we had some down years, and you had people flying planes overhead. That's from like 1977. That happens. It's when I am around the Giants, and it's hard for me to watch because I've been there, and I know uh, what it's like to lose your coach, your head coach, mid-season, and the changes that take place. And I sort of know what's coming down the pike. Coaches are going to get fired, players are going to get traded, and it depends on who is brought in. You might get a new GM, but those are things that are part of the game. Like I said, I've been there before, and I try not to watch any of the games because um, it bothers me because sometimes you go out and you see the play of certain players. And I'm not calling anybody out, but you see certain players, and it kind of takes me back to those years when I played, and certain players didn't do the job that they should have been doing. But the way that I got through it, because I begged them to trade me, and they wouldn't trade me. So, but I would walk off the field, and as I walked off the field, I would ask myself, did I do everything that I could do to help my team win? If the answer was yes, then it's out of my hands. If I feel like I gave my all, I gave my best, you can't do any better than that. But if the answer is no, it would bother me. And I think that that's the way I played, you know. Did I do everything that I could do to help my team win? Did I give my best?
And I say, look at the film, and the answer is
No,
yes.
no, 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 no. You don't have to look at the film. You can ask yourself, because I turn and I look and I ask, did I give my all? Did I do the best that I could do? And the 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 thing that you go to, like I found this out um, because I was going to Pro Bowls like in 1979 when the team wasn't very good. And you can fool the coach when you play. You can fool the fans, but you cannot fool the guys who you're playing against. They know when you're bringing it and when you're not. And so back then, it was the players who voted to for other players to go to the Pro Bowl. And so here I am, I'm going to 9 Pro Bowls, and I'm getting love from the guys who I played against. And they know whether I'm bringing it or not. And then when you have another player who would come to, like Randy White of the Dallas Cowboys, I was with him in Hawaii at the Pro Bowl. And he said, Harry, I would be honored to play in front of you, you know, and to have another player validate what you've done, you know, that's the thing that makes me feel really good, because there was nothing more that I could do. You know, players who I play against, they know, you know, Parcells may not have known, but Belichick may not have known. You know, all of my coaches may not have known, but you know, those guys who I played against, they knew.
Hmm.
You know,
And think about the names that we've been talking about throughout this interview. We didn't even bring up the fact that Phil Simms was the MVP of the Super Bowl, but think of Parcells and Belichick and LT and all the players that Harry Carson has played. When you were inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 2006, last question, who wasn't there that you wanted to have that person there but wasn't able to be there?
um, my mother and father, they were deceased, and all of my family was there. My my brothers were deceased. Um, so you know, everybody who played a pivotal role in my life, they were there. And the interesting thing is when they announce the um, those who make the Pro Bowl, make the Pro Football Hall of Fame, they alert you after um, Super Bowl, around Super Bowl time. But so that's in February, and you go to Canton in August, and so you have all of that time between time of the announcement and the time of the induction ceremony. And so it took, I had a long time to say what I needed or what I wanted to say. And I wrote a speech, but when I got up to speak, I threw the speech away that I had written. What I did was I went off script and I talked about Roger Goodell, the NFL Players Association, that they need to do a better job taking care of its own and on and on. But the other thing is the people who guided me in a certain direction. I thought about all of those people from the time that like mid-February until the beginning of August. And I thought of them and I wish that there was some way that I could go back and thank those people who did like little small things to make me or shape me into the person that I became.
I am the one individual who probably should not be standing before you this afternoon. I am so much unlike a football player. Physically, I look like a football player, but inside, I have my mother's heart. And in my mother's heart is being gentle, being caring, looking out for people. You have to have a hunger. You have to be committed to playing the game. And I committed myself to playing the game. I went through high school, earned a scholarship to South Carolina State. South Carolina State, I know you're in the house. I continue to say it's the best 4 years of my life. South Carolina State turned me from being a boy into a man.
One of the things that was very interesting was a few weeks ago, I ran into the guy that my mother was his nanny. She left the South when I was like 5 or 6 years old, and she moved to Newark, New Jersey, and she became a domestic, trying to take the money from what she earned and ship it back to South Carolina. And the thing that really had an impact with me is I'd never met him before, but he knew that I was Gladys Carson's son. Mm-hmm. And he came up to me and he said, "Your mother was my babysitter." And when he said that, I was like, oh my God, And I wasn't thinking about my mother at that time, but he talked about how good and how gracious my mother was with him. And, I just thought about how lucky I was to have people in my life who cared about me. And, whenever I go back to Florence, South Carolina, I recognize that I represent all of those people in Florence, South Carolina. And as a football player, or how I carry myself, I represent those people in Florence, South Carolina. I represent those people from South Carolina State, and on and on and on. And so the bust, the Hall of Fame bust that I have, Hall of Fame ring, I share that with all of my teammates, not just teammates from the Giants, but had it not been for those guys in the heat of running sprints, and when you're dead tired and you're keeling over and you feel like you're going to fall out, and you say to yourself, I'm running with these guys, and if they make it, I'm gonna hang in there and I'm gonna make it. And so they inspired me. You don't get there by yourself. There's a whole lot of people who made it possible to do what you've done. You represent them.
And that's why Harry Carson is not just known as Super Bowl champion, Hall of Famer, men's health advocate. He's a leader, Boy, we need more Harry Carsons in this world today, don't we? Harry Carson, thank you so much for joining us on SportsJam. It's been a pleasure and an honor to have you on the show. Continued good health, and we congratulate you on a successful not only pro career, but well beyond that. Thank you.
Thank you.
SportsJam is a WBGO Studios production. You can check out all the past shows by going to wbgo.org/sportsjam or wbgo.org/studios. You can also find SportsJam with Doug Doyle on the NPR list of podcasts or wherever you hear podcasts. Special thanks going out to WBGO's Daybreak host Gary Walker for getting me connected with Harry Carson. Until our next SportsJam session, I'll see you at the game.